My son took me to the lawyer to protect my assets. I trusted him. But the secretary whispered when my son Derek sat across from me at my kitchen table and said he wanted to help me protect everything his father had left me. I believed every word. Why wouldn't I? He was my boy, my firstborn. But what I didn't know was that the documents he wanted me to sign would have handed him everything. My house, my savings, my dignity. And if it hadn't been for a young woman I'd never met before, a secretary who leaned in close and whispered 6 words into my ear, I would have lost it all. Good day, dear listeners. It's Isabella again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. Today's story comes from a woman who learned the hardest lesson a mother can learn, that sometimes the person you trust the most is the one you should trust the least. But she also learned something beautiful. She learned that help can come from the most unexpected places. My name is Lorraine Whitfield. I'm 71 years old, and I live in a small brick house on Maple Terrace in Knoxville, Tennessee. I've lived in this house for 43 years. My husband, Frank, and I bought it the summer after we got married, back in 1981. It was a fixer-upper then, with a leaky roof and a kitchen that smelled like mildew no matter how many times I scrubbed it. But Frank had hands that could fix anything. He was a plumber by trade, but if you gave him a toolbox and a Saturday afternoon, he could rewire a ceiling fan, build a bookcase, or lay tile like a professional. Over the years, he turned that house into something beautiful. Frank worked for the city of Knoxville for 31 years. He never missed a day of work unless he was truly sick. And even then, he'd argue with me at the front door, insisting he was fine. He was a quiet man, not the type to make speeches or grand gestures. But every single Friday evening, without fail, he would bring me a small bouquet of flowers from the farmer's market on Cumberland Avenue. Daisies, mostly. Sometimes sunflowers. He'd set them on the kitchen counter without a word and just smile at me. That was Frank. He said everything without saying much at all. We had 2 children together, Derek, born in 1983, and our daughter, Janine, born in 1986. We raised them in that house with modest means, but with love, discipline, and faith that if you worked hard and treated people right, life would treat you fairly in return. Frank passed away on November 9th, 2019 from pancreatic cancer. He was 68 years old. The diagnosis came in July of that year, and by November, he was gone. 4 months. That's all we got between learning something was wrong and saying goodbye. After Frank died, I found out he had been more careful with money than I ever realized. He'd left me the house, fully paid off, a life insurance policy worth $320,000, a savings account with another $97,000 in it, and a small investment portfolio that his friend at Edward Jones had helped him build over the years, worth about $185,000. In total, I was sitting on a little over $600,000 in assets, more than enough for a 71-year-old woman to live comfortably for the rest of her life. Frank had made sure of that. Even after he was gone, he was still taking care of me. For the first couple of years after Frank passed, things were peaceful. Janine, my daughter, lives in Asheville, North Carolina, with her husband, Marcus, and their 2 children, Lily and Owen. She calls me every Sunday evening without fail. She drives up to visit at least once a month. When I had my gallbladder surgery in 2021, Janine took 2 weeks off work to stay with me. She cooked, cleaned, helped me bathe, and slept on the couch in the living room so she could hear me if I called out at night. That's the kind of daughter she is. Derek, on the other hand, lives right here in Knoxville, only about 12 minutes from my house, in a newer subdivision called Ridgewood Crossing. He married a woman named Vanessa in 2010, and they have 1 son, Caleb, who just turned 11. For a long time, Derek was a good son. He came by regularly, mowed my lawn, checked on the gutters, helped me with the things Frank used to do. I was proud of him. He worked as a regional sales manager for a building supply company, and he seemed to be doing well. Nice house, 2 cars, Caleb in private school. But things started to change around March of 2022. It was subtle at first. Derek began stopping by less often. When he did come, he seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly, cutting visits short. He stopped bringing Caleb with him. And then the questions about money started. The first time was on a Tuesday evening in March. Derek called me at 7:14 p.m. I remember because I was watching Jeopardy, and it had just come back from commercial. He said, "Mom, Vanessa and I are in a tight spot. We had some unexpected expenses with the house. A pipe burst in the basement, and the insurance isn't covering all of it. Could you lend us $5,000? I'll pay you back by the end of the month." I didn't hesitate. I wrote him a check the next morning. What else would a mother do? He was my son, and he said he needed help. He thanked me, hugged me, and told me he loved me. He never paid it back. The second time was in June of 2022. This time it was $8,000. Caleb needed braces, and their dental insurance had a cap, he said. I transferred the money directly into his checking account. He sent me a text that night. "You're the best, Mom. I don't know what I'd do without you." I saved that message. I looked at it sometimes when I missed having someone in the house. It made me feel needed. By September, it was another $12,000. This time, Vanessa had supposedly been in a minor car accident, and they needed to cover the deductible and some medical bills. Derek came to the house, sat in Frank's old recliner, the brown leather one by the window, and told me how stressed he was. He looked tired, thinner than usual. I gave him the money without question. In January of 2023, he asked for $15,000. He said the company was doing layoffs, and he was worried about his position. He wanted to put some money aside just in case. "I don't want Caleb to feel the impact if something happens," he told me. I transferred it that same afternoon. Then came April of 2023. Another $10,000. He said he and Vanessa were trying to refinance the house and needed to pay down a credit card to improve their credit score. I gave it. I didn't even ask to see the credit card statement. He was my son. You don't interrogate your own son. At least that's what I believed then. In total, between March 2022 and April 2023, I gave Derek exactly $50,000. I kept a small notebook where I recorded every amount, every date, every reason he gave me. Not because I was suspicious, just because Frank had always taught me to keep records. "Write everything down, Lorraine," he used to say. "Memory fades, but ink doesn't." I didn't know it then, but that little notebook would become the most important thing I owned. During that same period, I made sacrifices I never told anyone about. I canceled a trip to Savannah that Janine had planned for my 70th birthday. I told her I just didn't feel up to traveling, but the truth was, I didn't want to spend the money after giving so much to Derek. I postponed dental work I needed, 2 crowns and a root canal, for over a year because the out-of-pocket cost was $4,200, and I felt I couldn't justify it. I started buying generic brands at the grocery store. I turned the thermostat down to 62 degrees during the winter to save on the heating bill. I ate soup for dinner 3 nights a week because it was cheap and easy. And all that time, I never said a word to Janine. I didn't want her to worry. I didn't want her to think badly of her brother. I was protecting him. That's what mothers do, isn't it? We protect our children even when they don't deserve it. The moment everything changed was on Saturday, October 14th, 2023, at approximately 11:30 in the morning. Derek called me and said he wanted to take me to see a lawyer. His voice was warm, concerned, fatherly, ironic, considering he was the child. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about your situation," he said. "You're alone in that house. Dad left you with a lot of assets, and I just want to make sure everything is protected. What if something happens to you? What if you get sick and end up in a nursing home? Medicaid could take the house? We need to set up a trust or something. It sounded reasonable. It sounded caring. I was touched that he was thinking about my future. So on Thursday, October 19th, 2023, at 2 p.m., Derek picked me up in his silver Toyota Highlander and drove me to a law office on Kingston Pike. The sign on the door read, Reinhardt and Caldwell, Attorneys at Law. I had never heard of them. Derek said a coworker had recommended them. The office was on the second floor of a beige commercial building next to a State Farm insurance agency. The waiting room had gray carpet, 2 fake plants, and a stack of magazines from 2021. It smelled like toner and air freshener. A young woman sat behind the reception desk. She was in her late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and small gold earrings. Her nameplate read Megan Alvarez. She smiled at us when we walked in and asked us to have a seat. Derek seemed nervous. He kept bouncing his right knee and checking his phone. I thought he was just anxious about the legal process. Now I know he was anxious about something else entirely. After about 10 minutes, a man came out to greet us. He introduced himself as Arthur Caldwell. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with thinning gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a navy suit that didn't quite fit right across the shoulders. He shook my hand firmly and led us into his office. For the next 45 minutes, Arthur Caldwell talked about asset protection, irrevocable trusts, Medicaid planning, and power of attorney. He used a lot of legal terms I didn't fully understand, but Derek nodded along like he'd heard it all before. At the end of the meeting, Caldwell slid a stack of documents across the desk toward me. He said, Mrs. Whitfield, if you sign these today, we can get the process started immediately. Your son has been very proactive in getting all of this set up for you. I reached for my reading glasses in my purse, but before I could pick up the pen, something happened that I will never forget as long as I live. Megan Alvarez, the young secretary, came into the office carrying 2 bottles of water on a small tray. She placed one in front of me and one in front of Derek. As she leaned down to set mine on the desk, she brought her mouth close to my ear, so close I could smell her shampoo, something floral, like jasmine, and she whispered 6 words, Don't sign anything today, ma'am. Then she straightened up, smiled politely, and walked out of the room as if nothing had happened. Something cold settled in my chest, not sadness, not yet. Something sharper, clearer. My hand froze above the pen. I looked at the documents. I looked at Derek. He was staring at me with an expression I had never seen before. Expectation. Hunger. Not the face of a son who wanted to protect his mother. The face of a man who wanted something from her. You know what? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I think I'd like to take these home and read them over first. Maybe have Janine look at them too. She's good with paperwork. Derek's expression changed instantly. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed just slightly. Mom, there's really no need for that. Mr. Caldwell explained everything. If you wait too long, the Medicaid window could close. We should do this now. Arthur Caldwell nodded in agreement, but I noticed he didn't quite meet my eyes. I appreciate that, sweetheart, I said, but I'm not signing anything today. Your father always said never to sign something you haven't read at least twice. Derek argued with me for another 5 minutes. He used words like urgent and time-sensitive and I'm trying to help you, Mom. But I held firm. I gathered the documents, all 27 pages of them, put them in my purse, and told Derek I was ready to go home. The drive back to Maple Terrace was silent. Derek gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. When he dropped me off, he didn't walk me to the door like he usually did. He just said, "Let me know when you've read them," and drove away before I'd even closed the car door. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with those 27 pages spread out in front of me. I put on my reading glasses, poured myself a cup of chamomile tea, and started reading from the very first line. I read slowly, carefully, the way Frank would have done. And as I read, the cold feeling in my chest grew colder. The documents weren't setting up a trust to protect my assets. They were transferring my assets directly to Derek Michael Whitfield. The house on Maple Terrace transferred to Derek's name. My savings accounts reassigned to a joint account with Derek as primary holder. My investment portfolio placed under Derek's sole fiduciary control. And the power of attorney, it gave Derek complete irrevocable authority to make all financial and medical decisions on my behalf with no oversight, no checks, and no expiration date. If I had signed those papers, I would have owned nothing. I would have had no legal say over my own money, my own home, or even my own medical care. My son would have owned me. I sat there for a long time. The clock on the kitchen wall ticked past midnight. The tea went cold. I stared at the papers, and the papers stared back at me. Then I picked up the phone and called Janine. She answered on the second ring, even though it was after midnight. "Mom, what's wrong? Are you okay?" "I need you to come to Knoxville," I said, "as soon as you can. Something is very wrong." Janine arrived the next morning, Friday, October 20th, at 9:15 a.m. She had driven through the night. When she walked through my front door and saw the documents spread across the dining table, she dropped her bag on the floor and sat down without taking off her coat. It took her about an hour to read through everything. When she finished, her face was pale. Her hands were trembling. She looked at me and said, "Mom, do you understand what these documents would have done?" "I do now," I said. "He was going to take everything, the house, the money, everything Dad worked for, everything you've lived on. He was going to take it all and leave you with nothing." I nodded. I couldn't speak. My throat was too tight. Janine stood up and paced the kitchen. She was furious, but she was also organized. That's her nature. She gets angry, and then she gets strategic. She pulled out her phone and started making calls. By noon, she had scheduled an appointment with an attorney named Barbara Hendricks, a partner at Hendricks, Liu and Associates on Gay Street in downtown Knoxville. Barbara had been recommended by Janine's friend, who worked in elder law advocacy. She specialized in elder financial abuse cases. We met with Barbara Hendricks on Monday, October 23rd, at 10 a.m. Barbara was in her mid-50s, with short auburn hair, a firm handshake, and eyes that didn't miss anything. She wore a charcoal blazer and had a framed diploma from the University of Tennessee College of Law on her wall. She also had a framed quote on her desk that read, "Justice delayed is not justice denied. It's justice in progress." I liked her immediately. I brought the 27 pages. I brought my notebook with every payment I had made to Derek. Dates, amounts, reasons. Janine had printed out bank statements showing every transfer. Barbara spread them all across her conference table and studied them for nearly an hour, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When she looked up, her expression was calm but serious. "Mrs. Whitfield, what your son attempted is textbook elder financial abuse under Tennessee law. These documents were drafted to strip you of all autonomy and ownership. They're not standard asset protection instruments. They're instruments of control. And the $50,000 you've already given him, based on what you're telling me, was obtained through a pattern of deception." She paused, then added, "I'd also like to look into attorney Arthur Caldwell. A licensed attorney who drafts documents like these for the purpose of defrauding a senior client can face disciplinary action and possibly criminal charges." Here, Barbara asked me one more question. "Mrs. Whitfield, do you want to pursue this fully? Because once we start, we can't go halfway. Your son will know. Your family will know. It will be public." I looked at Frank's ring on my finger, the thin gold band he'd placed there 43 years ago. I thought about the flowers he used to bring me every Friday, the house he'd built with his hands, the money he'd saved so I would never have to worry. "Yes," I said, "fully." Over the next several weeks, Barbara Hendricks and her team launched a comprehensive investigation. She brought in a forensic accountant named Daniel Choi, who subpoenaed Derek's financial records through the court. She also requested records from Reinhardt and Caldwell's law office. What Daniel Choi uncovered was staggering. Derek had not been in financial trouble, not even close. His salary at the building supply company was $114,000 a year. Vanessa worked part-time as a dental hygienist and earned another $38,000. Their combined household income was over $150,000. The pipe burst in the basement, the braces for Caleb, the car accident, the potential layoff, the credit card debt. None of it was real. Every excuse he had used to take money from me was a fabrication. And where had the $50,000 gone? Daniel Choi traced it meticulously. $18,500 had been spent on a luxury vacation to Turks and Caicos in August 2022. I found photos of it on Vanessa's Facebook page, the two of them in lounge chairs on a white sand beach, holding cocktails with little umbrellas in them. $12,000 went toward a down payment on a boat, a 22-foot bayliner that Derek kept at a marina on Fort Loudoun Lake. $9,200 was spent at various high-end retailers, Nordstrom, Restoration Hardware, Apple, and $10,300 went to online gambling sites. Derek had a sports betting account that showed consistent activity going back to early 2022. My money, Frank's money, the money I had skipped meals and shivered through cold nights to preserve, had paid for beach vacations, a boat, designer furniture, and gambling losses. I spread all the receipts and bank records across my dining table one evening after Janine had gone to bed. The total stared back at me. $50,000. Gone. Spent on lies and luxury while I ate canned soup and turned down the thermostat to 62 degrees. Barbara also investigated Arthur Caldwell. It turned out Caldwell had been disciplined by the Tennessee Board of Professional Responsibility twice before, once in 2017 for a conflict of interest and once in 2019 for failure to communicate with the client. He was not a reputable attorney. He was the kind of lawyer you hired when you didn't want questions asked, and Derek had found him on purpose. Barbara also discovered something else. Derek had made 2 previous attempts to access my financial accounts directly. In July 2023, he had called my bank, First Horizon, and tried to add himself as a joint holder on my savings account. The bank had flagged the request because I hadn't been present. In September 2023, he had contacted my financial advisor at Edward Jones, a man named Gregory Park, and asked for information about my investment portfolio, claiming I had authorized him to manage it. Gregory had declined and noted the interaction in my file. My son had been circling my money like a vulture for months before he ever took me to that lawyer's office. In late November 2023, Barbara filed a civil lawsuit against Derek Michael Whitfield on my behalf, alleging elder financial abuse, fraud, and undue influence. She also filed a complaint against Arthur Caldwell with the Board of Professional Responsibility, and she contacted the Knox County District Attorney's Office, which opened a criminal investigation into Derek's conduct. When Derek received the legal summons, he exploded. On the evening of November 28th, at approximately 6:45 p.m., he showed up at my front door, pounding on it so hard the wreath rattled. I didn't open it. I stood in the hallway with my phone in my hand. "Mom, open this door. What the hell is this? You're suing me? Your own son? This is insane. You're losing your mind. I was trying to help you." I didn't respond. I stood very still, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. "You know what? Fine. Don't open the door, but I'm telling you right now, I will have you declared mentally incompetent. You hear me? You're 71 years old, living alone, clearly confused. I'll get a doctor to say you can't make your own decisions, and then we'll see who controls what." I recorded every word on my phone. Barbara had told me to document everything. After about 10 minutes, my neighbor, Carl Jessup, came outside and told Derek to leave, or he'd call the police. Derek cursed at Carl, got in his car, and sped away, nearly hitting the mailbox at the end of the driveway. Over the next few weeks, Derek launched a campaign to turn the family against me. He called my sister Ruth in Chattanooga and told her I was going senile and that Janine was manipulating me into suing him. He called Frank's brother, Howard, in Memphis and said I was wasting the family inheritance on lawyers. He even contacted 2 of my neighbors, telling them I was mentally unstable and that they should keep an eye on me. But it didn't work. Ruth called me directly and said, "Lorraine, I've known you for 71 years. You're the sharpest woman I've ever met. That boy's lying," and I told him so. Howard said roughly the same thing, with a few more colorful words added. And my neighbors, Carl and his wife Diane, started checking on me every day, bringing me casseroles and sitting with me on the porch in the evenings. I wasn't alone anymore. Derek also sent me a series of text messages that became increasingly hostile. On December 3rd, he wrote, "You're going to regret this. You're choosing strangers over your own blood." On December 7th, "Dad would be ashamed of you." That one hurt. That one almost broke me. I sat in Frank's recliner and cried for 20 minutes. But then I looked at the daisies Janine had placed on the kitchen counter. She'd started bringing me flowers every Friday, just like Frank used to. And I dried my eyes. On December 15th, Vanessa sent me a message. "You're destroying our family. Caleb asks about you every day. Are you happy now?" I didn't respond. Barbara had advised me not to engage, but I saved every message. The trial was held on Tuesday, March 12th, 2024, at the Knox County Chancery Court on Main Street in downtown Knoxville. The courtroom was on the 3rd floor, a formal room with dark wood paneling, high ceilings, and an American flag beside the bench. The Honorable Judge Sandra Whitmore presided. She was a tall woman in her early 60s, with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses that she wore on a chain around her neck. She had a reputation for being thorough, fair, and absolutely merciless toward anyone who abused the vulnerable. Barbara Hendricks presented the case methodically and devastatingly. She began with the 27 pages of fraudulent documents drafted by Arthur Caldwell. She projected them onto a screen for the court to see, highlighting every clause that would have transferred my assets to Derek. She called Daniel Choi, the forensic accountant, who presented a detailed analysis of every dollar I had given Derek and where it had gone, the vacations, the boat, the shopping, the gambling. She called Gregory Park, my financial advisor, who testified about Derek's unauthorized attempt to access my investment portfolio. She called a representative from First Horizon Bank, who confirmed Derek's attempt to add himself to my savings account without my knowledge. She presented the text messages, the voicemails, the recording I had made of Derek screaming at my front door on November 28th. She presented Vanessa's Facebook photos, the beach vacation, the boat on Fort Loudon Lake, the new furniture in their living room, all purchased with money Derek had taken from me under false pretenses. And then she called me to the stand. I was nervous. My hands trembled as I placed them on the wooden railing of the witness box. The courtroom felt enormous. I could see Derek sitting at the defense table with his attorney, a man named Victor Sloan, who looked uncomfortable even being there. Barbara asked me to describe my relationship with my son. I told the truth, all of it. The good years, the love, the gradual change, the request for money, the lies, the documents, and the whisper. "Mrs. Whitfield," Barbara said, "can you tell the court what happened in Attorney Caldwell's office on October 19th, 2023? I was about to sign papers that would have given my son everything I own," I said, and a young woman, a secretary named Megan Alvarez, leaned in close and whispered to me. She said, "Don't sign anything today, ma'am." And I didn't. The courtroom was quiet. Judge Whitmore looked at me over her reading glasses and made a note. Derek's attorney, Victor Sloan, attempted a defense. He argued that Derek had genuinely been trying to protect my assets and that the documents were standard estate planning instruments. He claimed the money I'd given Derek was a gift, not a loan, and that I had given it willingly. He tried to suggest that Janine had influenced me against Derek out of jealousy. Barbara dismantled every argument. She pointed to the specific language of the documents, which 3 independent attorneys had reviewed and confirmed were designed to strip me of ownership and control. She presented my notebook, where I had recorded every loan with the word repay written beside each entry. And she introduced testimony from Janine, who calmly and clearly described the night I called her, the documents she read, and the fear in my voice. Victor Sloan called Derek to testify. It did not go well for him. Under cross-examination by Barbara, Derek contradicted himself multiple times. He claimed the pipe burst in his basement had cost $7,000 to repair, but Barbara produced his homeowner's insurance records, showing no claim had ever been filed. He said Caleb's braces had cost $8,000 out of pocket, but Barbara presented records from Caleb's orthodontist, showing the total cost was $4,800, and insurance had covered $3,600 of it. He said Vanessa's car accident had resulted in medical bills, but Barbara showed there was no accident report filed with the Knoxville Police Department on the date Derek had specified. One by one, every lie crumbled. Judge Whitmore was silent through most of the proceedings, watching carefully, taking notes. When both sides rested, she removed her glasses, set them on the bench, and spoke directly. This court finds that Derek Michael Whitfield engaged in a deliberate, sustained pattern of financial exploitation against his mother, Lorraine May Whitfield, a vulnerable adult under Tennessee Code, annotated Section 71-6-102. The defendant obtained $50,000 through fraud and deception. He further attempted to execute a scheme to unlawfully transfer the entirety of his mother's assets, valued at over $600,000, through documents drafted with the clear intent to deceive. She paused, looking directly at Derek. Mr. Whitfield, what you did to your mother is not a disagreement over money. It is a betrayal of the most fundamental trust that exists between a parent and a child. This court does not take that lightly. She ordered full restitution of $50,000 plus $35,000 in compensatory damages for emotional distress and the expenses I had deferred because of the money I'd given him. She ordered Derek to pay all of my legal fees, which totaled $28,700. She issued a restraining order prohibiting Derek from coming within 500 feet of my home or contacting me directly, and she referred the case to the Knox County District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. Total judgment against Derek, $113,700. As for Arthur Caldwell, the Board of Professional Responsibility suspended his law license pending a full investigation. He was later disbarred in July 2024. Criminal charges of conspiracy to commit elder abuse were filed against him, and he ultimately pled guilty to a reduced charge in exchange for 2 years of probation and a $25,000 fine. In the criminal case, the district attorney's office charged Derek with felony exploitation of a vulnerable adult. He pled no contest in June 2024 and was sentenced to 3 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory participation in a financial restitution program. The consequences for Derek didn't stop at the courtroom. Vanessa filed for divorce in April 2024. According to Janine, who heard it through mutual acquaintances, Vanessa had not known the full extent of what Derek had done. When the truth came out in court, she was horrified. She told Derek she could not stay married to a man who would steal from his own mother. She took Caleb and moved in with her parents in Maryville. Derek's employer, the building supply company, learned about the felony charge and terminated him in May 2024. His reputation in the Knoxville business community was ruined. Several mutual friends cut ties with him. His neighbor at Ridgewood Crossing, a man named Tom Driscoll, told Janine he had seen Derek loading boxes into a U-Haul in late June. Derek lost the house. He couldn't afford the mortgage without Vanessa's income and without the money he'd been siphoning from me. The boat on Fort Loudoun Lake was repossessed. The luxury furniture was sold. The trips to Turks and Caicos became memories that tasted like ash. I saw Derek one more time in September 2024. I was at the Kroger on Broadway picking up groceries. I came around the end of the cereal aisle, and there he was, standing in front of the oatmeal, wearing a wrinkled shirt and jeans that looked too big for him. He had lost weight. His hair was uncombed. He looked like a man who had lost everything, because he had. He saw me, and for a moment neither of us moved. His mouth opened like he wanted to say something. Then it closed again. His eyes were red. He looked away first. I walked past him. I put a box of chamomile tea in my cart and continued down the aisle. I felt nothing. Not triumph, not pity, just quiet certainty that justice had been served, and an ache somewhere deep, in the place where the mother in me still lived, that I knew would never fully go away. The restitution money came through in stages. By October 2024, I'd received the full $113,700. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had spread out those terrible documents a year earlier, and thought about what to do with it. The first thing I did was get my dental work done. 2 crowns and a root canal at Dr. Patricia Simmons' office on North Shore Drive. Total cost, $4,200. I should have done it a year and a half earlier. When I walked out of that office with a healthy smile, I felt 10 pounds lighter. The second thing I did was set up education savings accounts for Lily and Owen, Janine's children. I put $15,000 into each account. Frank would have wanted that. He always said education was the one investment that never loses value. The third thing I did was book the trip to Savannah that I had canceled, but this time I didn't go alone. I took Janine, Lily, and Owen. We stayed in a bed and breakfast on Forsyth Park for 5 days. We walked along the riverfront, ate pralines, and took a ghost tour that made Owen scream and Lily laugh until she cried. On the last evening, we sat on a bench in the park, and Janine put her arm around me and said, "Dad would have loved this." "He's here," I said, and I believed it. I donated $10,000 to the East Tennessee Elder Abuse Prevention Coalition, an organization that Barbara Hendricks had introduced me to. They provide legal resources and advocacy for seniors who are being exploited by family members. I wanted other women like me to have somewhere to turn, someone to call, someone who would believe them. I also tracked down Megan Alvarez. It took some work. She had left Reinhardt and Caldwell's office shortly after my visit. I later learned she had quit because she couldn't stomach what Caldwell was doing. She was working at a nonprofit legal aid clinic in South Knoxville when I found her. I drove there on a Thursday afternoon in November 2024. She was sitting at a desk covered in files, her hair still in that same ponytail. When she looked up and saw me, her eyes widened. "Mrs. Whitfield? You saved my life," I said. "I came to say thank you." She stood up and came around the desk. She was smaller than I remembered. She couldn't have been more than 5'3". This tiny young woman had risked her job, maybe her career, to whisper 6 words to a stranger. "I could see what was happening," she said. "I saw the documents before the meeting. I knew what they were. And when you walked in, you looked so trusting. You looked like my grandmother. I couldn't let you sign them." I hugged her. I held onto her for a long time. Then I handed her an envelope. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a letter I had written by hand, thanking her for her courage. She tried to refuse the money. I insisted. "Take it," I said. "You earned it. You earned it more than anyone I've ever known." Today, as I sit in my house on Maple Terrace, I'm at peace. The rose bushes Frank planted along the front walkway bloomed again this spring, more beautiful than ever. I've joined a book club at the public library. I volunteer at the Elder Abuse Prevention Coalition twice a month, talking to other seniors about recognizing the signs of financial exploitation. I tell them about the notebook I kept. I tell them about the documents I almost signed. I tell them about the secretary who whispered. My neighbor Diane tells me I look 10 years younger. My doctor says my blood pressure is the best it's been in a decade. Janine still calls every Sunday evening, still brings flowers every Friday. Lily and Owen are thriving, and every morning, when I sit in Frank's old recliner with my cup of tea and watch the sun come through the window, I feel him near. I learned something through all of this. I learned that trust is precious, and it should be given carefully, even to the people you love most. I learned that a mother's love can be used as a weapon against her if she isn't paying attention. And I learned that courage doesn't always come in loud voices or grand gestures. Sometimes it comes in a whisper from a stranger in a lawyer's office. Some people ask me if I miss Derek. The honest answer is that I miss the boy he used to be, the little boy who used to follow Frank around the yard with a toy hammer, pretending to help, the teenager who wrote me a poem for Mother's Day that made me cry, the young man who danced with me at his wedding. That boy I miss. But that boy grew into a man who would have left his mother with nothing, and I cannot forgive that. Not because I'm cruel, but because forgiveness without accountability is just permission to be hurt again. So I ask you, if the person you trusted most in this world tried to take everything from you, what would you do? Would you fight back? Would you stay silent? Would you listen if a stranger whispered a warning in your ear? I want to hear your answer. Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories. Tell someone you love about this channel. And remember, you are never too old to stand up for yourself. You are never too old to demand what is yours. And you are never, ever alone. Thank you for listening.